The halls of Congress are no strangers to confrontation, but what unfolded in this hearing shook the entire country. When Representative Jasmine Crockett stepped into the chamber, she carried more than a binder of evidence. She brought the weight of a community's cries for justice. Opposite her sat Senator Bill Hagerty, silent and composed, unaware that his carefully constructed narrative was about to be torn apart. What began as a routine inquiry turned into a moment that would echo far beyond Washington. Make sure to like and subscribe for more hard-hitting stories that challenge power and expose the truth. The hearing room was unusually quiet. Cameras clicked, pages shuffled, but the air held something heavier, an unspoken tension that no one dared name. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat still, her eyes fixed on Senator Bill Hagerty across the room. He was reading through a stack of documents, his expression calm, indifferent, maybe even smug. But what was he really preparing for? Did he think this was just another oversight hearing? Another political formality to dodge with a few rehearsed lines and legal jargon? The public had grown used to watching these hearings play out like scripted theater. But this one felt different. Why had Crockett, known for her sharp questioning and unyielding presence, requested extra time to speak? Why had her aides been seen leaving late-night meetings for the past week, carrying boxes of sealed folders? Was this just political posturing, or was something darker beneath the surface? When her name was called to speak, Crockett did not hesitate. She stood calmly but firmly and stepped up to the microphone. She opened a folder slowly, methodically, and placed it on the table before her. Then she looked up, directly at Hagerty, and said the words that cut through the room like a blade. "Senator Hagerty, are you prepared to explain your role in the cover-up of police brutality in your home state?" Gasps spread across the room. Reporters jolted upright, pens scribbling. Hagerty looked stunned for just a second, before composing himself with a familiar politician's smirk. "I have no idea what you're referring to, Representative," he said coolly. But Crockett was just getting started. "Then allow me to remind you," she said, flipping open the folder to reveal the first set of documents. "These are internal memos from your office, dated just days after a police-involved killing in Shelby County. Memos that instructed staff to minimize public scrutiny and defer to state authorities. You called it a matter for local leadership. But a young man died, Senator. He died begging for air, while officers laughed. The chamber fell into silence again, this time longer. Hagerty shifted in his seat. He glanced toward his aide, who refused to meet his eyes. Was this really happening on live television? Could a sitting senator have knowingly buried evidence of police violence to protect his image, or worse, to shield those responsible? And if so, what else was hidden in those folders Crockett brought with her? Crockett continued, her voice steady, but rising in passion. She read quotes from internal communications, described meetings that Hagerty's staff had attended with police union leaders, and displayed emails flagged as sensitive that suggested direct pressure on local officials to drop internal investigations. "Was your office protecting law enforcement?" she asked, "or protecting themselves?" The senator tried to interject, but Crockett held up her hand. "You will have time to respond," she said, her eyes locked on his. "But first, the American people deserve to hear the full truth." She then turned to the committee chair and requested permission to play a recording. As the room dimmed slightly and the speakers crackled to life, the audience leaned in. What would they hear? What had been captured that even the mainstream media had missed? And most importantly, how far would the fallout reach? The recording began. A scratchy hiss filled the room as the recording began. For a moment, no one breathed. Then a voice came through, quiet at first but unmistakable. It was a police officer, his tone casual, almost indifferent. "Yeah, Hagerty's team said too. Keep it internal. Told us, no press, no statements, let it blow over. Said they'd handle the political side." Gasps rippled through the chamber like thunder. A few reporters dropped their pens. Bill Hagerty's face flushed, his composure cracking for the first time. Jasmine Crockett stood silent, arms folded, letting the recording speak for itself. She didn't need to say a word. The evidence was saying everything. The voice continued. They knew it looked bad. Body cam was brutal. But the senator? He just said, "We can't afford a race riot right now, not with re-election coming." I told my captain, "This ain't right, man." But they shut me down. Crockett hit pause. A stunned silence filled the space, broken only by murmurs from the audience and the hushed whispers of aides frantically checking their phones. Everyone watching knew this was no longer a political skirmish. This was an indictment of moral collapse at the highest level. Jasmine slowly turned toward Hagerty. "You silenced a department whistleblower," she said, voice taut with disbelief. "You coordinated with police to suppress a homicide investigation because it threatened your seat?" Hagerty stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly behind him. "This is a smear job," he snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about." But Crockett stepped forward. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mother who called your office every day for 2 months, begging for answers. I'm talking about the civil rights lawyer who was told to back off or lose funding. I'm talking about the kid who never made it home because he matched a description." She threw another folder onto the table. "This is the coroner's report, sealed by a court order under pressure from your former legal aid. It lists internal trauma inconsistent with the initial police narrative. What's more disturbing is that your office requested a summary version of this report, stripped of graphic details, and that's what was leaked to the press." Hagerty's lips tightened. "This is political theater," he muttered. "You're trying to destroy my name." Crockett stared him down. "You destroyed your name the moment you chose silence over justice." The room erupted into chaotic chatter. Senators murmured among themselves, some recoiling, others scribbling furious notes. Staffers looked pale. The hearing chair banged, his gavel in vain, struggling to regain order. But there was no going back. Not after this. As the noise settled, Crockett leaned into the mic, now speaking not just to Hagerty, but to the country. "I'm not here to play politics. I'm here because someone has to answer for what happened, and if that someone is a senator, so be it." She looked at the panel, her voice unwavering. "I move to subpoena all internal communications between Senator Hagerty's office and Shelby County law enforcement from the last 2 years. Let's see how deep this goes." Hagerty's expression darkened. He knew what that meant. It wasn't just political heat anymore. It was legal exposure. It was the unraveling of a carefully concealed alliance built on silence and convenience. And Jasmine Crockett was not done yet. Bill Hagerty leaned back in his chair, stiff as stone, his jaw clenched in fury as whispers in the chamber grew louder. He glanced to his chief of staff, who gave a slow, desperate shake of the head. There was no easy way out. Jasmine Crockett had torn through the first layer of defenses, and now she was pulling apart the scaffolding of his reputation with brutal precision. The committee chair approved her motion to subpoena Hagerty's communications, and the vote wasn't even close. One by one, even his own allies distanced themselves. As aides rushed to retrieve digital records, Crockett took a step back, but not to rest. She turned toward the gallery, addressing not the senator this time, but the American people. "There are some things we are never meant to forget," she said, the sound of a man choking on his own breath while pleading for his life. The silence that followed, and the cover-up that ensued in the shadows. Gasps turned to murmurs as new images flashed on the chamber screen. Body cam footage. Blurry, at first, then focused. A young black man was pinned to the ground, crying out for his mother. 3 officers restrained him. One shouted at bystanders to step back. None moved to de-escalate. Crockett let the footage speak. There was no voiceover, no commentary, just the raw sound of violence and apathy. "How long did you think this would stay buried?" she asked sharply. "How many names did you think we'd forget?" Then she pulled up another document, one few expected to see. "This," she said, "is an email exchange between your communications director and a high-ranking police official. In it, your office offers media coaching for officers involved in the incident." "Coaching, Senator? Not counseling, not investigation, not reform," Hagerty interrupted, voice strained, his hands clenched tight against the table. "You do not understand what it means to protect the integrity of an institution." Crockett turned toward him, unflinching. "No, Senator, I understand it perfectly. It means you protect justice, not power. You protect people, not privilege. And you do not manipulate the truth just to protect your seat in Congress." The chamber was still again. But behind that silence, something had shifted. Crockett's words no longer sounded like accusations. They sounded like indictments. And Hagerty's protests? They began to sound hollow. The senator seemed to realize it too. His voice cracked as he tried to reclaim control. "You're grandstanding." She leaned in slightly. "No, I'm testifying." Then came a moment no one saw coming. One of Hagerty's own former staffers stood from the audience, asked to be sworn in, and testified under oath that the senator had personally signed off on directives to downplay the investigation. Her voice trembled as she recounted a meeting where concerns about civil rights were dismissed as optics issues. That was the fracture point. From there, witnesses began to come forward. A state investigator, a civil rights attorney, a former police captain. One by one, they confirmed the story Crockett had been building piece by piece. The narrative Hagerty tried to deny now stood exposed from every angle, like a broken dam giving way to a flood. The press pool surged, phones buzzed, hashtags erupted across social media. Every network was streaming the hearing live. Crockett's name trended above the president's. And yet, in the eye of the storm, Jasmine remained composed. Her voice had not risen in rage. Her words had not been born of spectacle. Her power came from the facts, and the families they had tried to bury. As the gavel banged again, signaling a recess, Crockett turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with Hagerty one last time. "You thought silence would save you," she said quietly. "But silence is what brought me here." The corridor outside the chamber was a war zone of reporters, microphones, and live feeds. Jasmine Crockett walked through it like a woman on a mission, unmoved by the frenzy around her. The hallway buzzed with questions about the subpoenas, the footage, the whistleblowers, but she ignored everyone. Her eyes were fixed ahead. There was more to do. The cover-up was wide, the lies deeper than anyone imagined. Inside, Bill Hagerty remained seated, surrounded by his legal team, who whispered with visible panic. They understood what was coming. Once those subpoenaed communications were entered into the record, it would be more than just a public scandal. It could become a criminal investigation. Back in session, Crockett wasted no time. She opened with a message sent from Hagerty's private account to the governor's office during the height of the protests following the police killing. It says, "We must not allow this to become our George Floyd moment. Keep local agitators under surveillance and delay the release of body cam footage. Control the narrative." The words echoed through the chamber like a punch to the chest. The context was unmistakable. This was not a statement made in fear. It was a calculated strategy to bury a crisis. Gasps filled the room, but Crockett wasn't finished. She stepped aside, allowing a man in a charcoal suit to take the witness seat. He introduced himself as a former state cybersecurity officer, and his testimony detonated like a bomb. "I was ordered to wipe a series of email servers after the protest investigation was closed. I flagged it to my supervisor. 2 hours later, I was reassigned." "Did those servers belong to Senator Hagerty's office?" Crockett asked. "Yes, ma'am," and the deletion request came from a private contractor working under a grant pushed through by his staff. The room convulsed again in uproar. Hagerty's team tried to object, but the chair overruled them. Evidence suppression, electronic, tampering, coordinated silencing. It was no longer about a single cover-up. It was a systemic rot, and Jasmine Crockett had cracked it wide open. But what she did next proved this wasn't about political revenge. It was about accountability. She brought out a folder labeled with the name of the victim, Marion Wells, a 22-year-old college student. No record, no weapons, just a hoodie and headphones. He was tackled outside a grocery store because he matched the description of a robbery suspect. The actual suspect had already been arrested in another district. Crockett turned to the family seated in the front row. Marion's mother clutched a photograph in her hands. His sister wept quietly beside her. Crockett's tone softened. But her resolve never wavered. "They told you it was a mistake," she said. "They told you he resisted. They told you it was justified. But what they never told you, what they tried to hide from you, is that your son was begging for help while they laughed." The gallery was silent, stunned by the rawness of the moment. Even the most hardened political analysts on television choked on their commentary. And then Jasmine looked back at Hagerty. "You think this is about political capital? I think this is about human life. You gambled with the truth, Senator, but you did not count on someone being willing to lose everything to find it." One by one, others began to follow her lead. A junior senator stood up and pledged to co-sponsor new police accountability legislation. A former ally of Hagerty issued a public statement calling for his resignation. State officials opened an independent inquiry, and all the while, the world kept watching. News outlets around the globe picked up the story. Civil rights groups rallied. Even figures once cautious about taking a side now voiced support, emboldened by Crockett's unrelenting clarity. By the end of the day, the Justice Department had requested transcripts of the entire hearing. And still, Jasmine showed no signs of slowing down. The final gavel hadn't dropped, but the verdict had already begun forming. Not in court, but in the conscience of a nation. The hearing room remained tense, thick with the weight of what had just unfolded. Bill Hagerty sat frozen, no longer defiant, no longer posturing. Whatever armor he had once worn, status, influence, institutional power, it now crumbled in plain view. Jasmine Crockett stood once more, but this time there was no need for theatrics. Her presence alone commanded attention. America had watched her pull back the curtain on something darker than corruption. It was sanctioned indifference, layered in bureaucracy, buried under red tape, and guarded by men like Hagerty who believed truth could be negotiated. "There is no dignity in silence," she said softly, pacing the floor. "There is no justice in delay. The families you dismissed have sat quietly while you rebranded oppression as order. That ends today." Outside the chamber, protests swelled to thousands. People held candles, banners, and printed pages of the emails Crockett had revealed. A name once known only in legal filings, Marion Wells, now echoed in chants, a symbol not just of a death, but of everything that death represented. And yet, Jasmine never lost focus. She submitted a formal ethics complaint against Hagerty, backed by the sworn testimony and digital evidence gathered over the past 2 days. Her team also filed for a full federal investigation into the tampering of state records and the obstruction of civil rights inquiries. Every signature was in place, every motion backed by law. "You used every tool of your office to shield yourself," she told Hagerty, now pale and visibly sweating. "But we used the truth, and that's a tool you cannot regulate, cannot redact, and cannot silence." The committee voted unanimously to move forward with disciplinary recommendations, but even that didn't satisfy the room. What had happened was bigger than censure. This was now a question of criminality. Indictments loomed. The department, of Justice had issued a formal statement. The Tennessee Attorney General launched an immediate review of all police-related casework connected to Hagerty's office. And yet, Crockett didn't stay to celebrate. She walked straight out of the building and into the press circle. Not to bask in the headlines, but to deliver a warning. "This is not the end," she said, "because I have read the memos. I have seen the training protocols. I have seen the line items in the budget marked community support that were funneled into surveillance tools. We are just getting started." One reporter shouted, "Do you believe Hagerty should resign?" Crockett paused, looked straight into the lens, and answered without hesitation, "I believe he should be prosecuted." The air shifted again. This wasn't a political reckoning. It was moral. It was generational. Hagerty's career had not just ended in disgrace. It had detonated on national television because someone refused to look away. That evening, anchors replayed the footage of Jasmine facing down the senator frame by frame like a moment from history. Her voice, calm but unrelenting, had carved through the noise. Her evidence had dismantled the structure of a lie that many had quietly accepted. And Marion Wells, who once was a name in a closed report, now had a law named after him. Drafted before the hearing had even concluded, Jasmine never asked for applause. She never framed it as heroism. She simply said what too many had been afraid to say for too long. "We can only call ourselves a democracy if our justice belongs to everyone." And with that, she walked into the crowd outside the Capitol, not as a politician claiming victory, but as a citizen who had demanded accountability, and delivered it.